Hi, everyone, and welcome to 3 Surprising Ways to Beat Facebook Ad Fatigue. I am your intro host, Jen Karsner, a part of the Local IQ WordStream team, and I am really excited to introduce everybody in just a minute to our exclusive host, Dennis Wilson, who's going to be presenting today's topic for us today. What's really great about our partnership with WordStream and Local IQ is we all know that marketing technology changes day by day and has become strategic to increase overall efficiency and really stay up to date on what our competition and competitors look like. And what's been really great is that with WordStream, we've been able to partner with Local IQ. And some of you guys may know what Local IQ is, some of you may not. For those of you that don't, Local IQ is actually the digital marketing experts amongst communities. With deep roots in over 260 communities across the country, it's really our passion to help local businesses and communities grow. And what's incredible about working with Local IQ in our partnership is that our tools, our reporting, our tracking and analytics measure how you engage with your audience and transform big data into actionable insights that can really help increase your conversion rates and move the needle forward within your business. So without further ado, I would love to introduce all of you guys today on the webinar to our expert speaker today, Dennis Wilson. He's going to be talking all about 3 ways to fight Facebook ad fatigue.
Thank you, Jennifer. And good morning, afternoon, and every evening to everyone. I really appreciate you setting aside some of your busy day today to share that time with us. I'll start with a story. In March of 2020 this year, my family and I chose to try a new version of something that we have done in a very similar fashion for many years. Now, don't get too excited. This is spring break with 3 children. So, however, every spring break, literally for the last 10 years, we go to the beach when my children get out of school. Usually by Thanksgiving, maybe as late as Christmas, depending on how hectic the holiday season was. At least a few months before spring break, we've decided on either a hotel or a house or what have you. But this year, in 2020, right, of all years to try something new, we decided to pull the travel trailer to the beach. Now, as much as I would like to continue to chat with all of you about my vacation, because that would be fun, this story actually becomes most relevant to us as my family began our trip home. Not just on our return to home, but also on our return to technology. We were really great this trip about putting our tech gadgets away, partially why I really wanted to push the travel trailer. So it was all my idea. I'll go ahead and take the blame for it. But I remember on the drive back, my wife started catching up with some of her girlfriends and the family, so on and so forth. And there was definitely a few consistent themes that I started hearing on these conversations, right? I would go as far to even say keywords, key topics. And naturally, I say keywords and key topics because I'm a marketing nerd, right? And I embrace that wholly. But anyway, I took these keywords and I just made a mental note at the time, and I was already planning to do some digging. There's a tool that I partnered with. You may recognize some of the screenshots in a minute. That measures the quantity of public mentions, and this is filtered down to the United States for these words. So if we all think back to March, think about a few things everybody was talking about. So I'll let you play this game with yourself as we go. I'm going to tell you there's 4 of them here. The first one was Lysol spray. I'm interesting if you kind of take a look here, there's the line, the blue line there, that's going from February to March. And in February, there's about 8,000 public mentions of the word Lysol spray. But in March, we jumped to over 47,000 public mentions of the word Lysol spray. You really kind of see that spike start February 26th. So again, out on spring break, I was behind the times. The next one, bleach. Apparently, we like to talk about bleach quite a bit anyway. We were averaging around in February about 200, just shy of 270,000 mentions. But in March, now we're at 840 plus thousand mentions of the word bleach. It's hand sanitizer. I mean, just look at these 2 months, 3.3 million mentions. But when you break that down around hand sanitizer, there was only about 150,000 mentions in February, just shy of 3 million of them in March. Now I'll give you one silent guess to yourself what you think the last word was that I heard on our way home after being disconnected for a week and a half. You're right, it was toilet paper. Apparently we like to talk about toilet paper anyway. In February, about 240,000 mentions, but in March, 5.5 million mentions about the word toilet paper. Remember, when I talk about mentions, these are things that made it, someone typed them, or they lived on an actual publicly available site, internet place to crawl and collect. 5.5 million of those. So, as you can imagine, on our return trip home, we made this skeptical stop at the next Walmart, the next grocery store, the convenience store, Amazon, because we were told we had to find this stuff. And then the mild panic set in. And us, like so many others, so many other families all over the world, experienced a change. Not a change we had an option in. We had to change. Our Friday night family outings, which my daughter called now innings. She doesn't grasp baseball yet, but anyway, our Friday night innings shifted to digging through the closet with all the board games for Friday night game night. Right, to eat, it was only local fare. I mean, what local business could we support? That's where we went. Like, oh man, we want this place to be here, want this place to be here. And the time we thought, man, in a couple months, we really want to make sure that's going to be here. I will tell you, many of these places didn't even have a seamless way of ordering online. If online ordering was even available, I mean, curbside was clunky. I remember the pharmacy drive-through line being the longest. It was just, I mean, I just couldn't believe it. But for the next couple of months, we didn't even think about going to a store, at least not nearly in the same way. I mean, online, that was our go-to. Dining was online. I was a late adopter. So groceries, I wasn't super avid about using groceries online, but groceries went online. Prescriptions, absolutely online. And this one was the real kicker. Movies, only online. Work online, meetings online, school online, family online. And I don't know about you, I found out very quickly my internet was not fast enough. But the point here is everyone's eyeballs were online. All the eyeballs, more than ever. I think we were online so much our eyes literally hurt. This new digital matrix that we're all forced into, though, I mean, it really wasn't doom and gloom if you stop and take a look. The transformation that businesses made in 2020 alone is just staggering. I feel so lucky to having been in a position to be able to partner with so many. When you look at this study that McKinsey published, you'll see how quickly we really replaced physical channels of commerce in just Q1 of 2020. What you're looking at here is 10 years of growth in just 3 months. In my home, one of the stats that really hit me hard. In March of 2020, there was more than 1,000% increase in education app downloads. And again, we could have a whole nother session on how to do school from home, but another day, another time. Bottom line is here, the amount of content, the number of sites and places that we visit online skyrocketed at an unprecedented pace. As a result, guess what else was skyrocketing? The number of ads that we were exposed to. Now, I use the word exposed very intentionally. And because it's something I observe, not only inside my own household, but just in the market. My youngest daughter, it felt like she immediately began to notice commercials, and she talked about them. They influenced her playtime, her make-believe, and trust me, they influenced her Christmas list. My older boys were talking about things I'd never heard them talk about before, brands they had never talked about before, and it naturally influenced their Christmas list too. But guess what else was influenced? You think about all the signals my family is giving, all these sites, all these publishers, all these places now. Targeting and retargeting on my household devices, sometimes specifically on my device, right? The suggestions on my YouTube and my Netflix, because we were just in front of it and around it so much. There was no discipline around, oh, make sure you're on your profile. It's comical to see what YouTube recommended for me and what Netflix recommended to me based on what my children were looking at. But as it ends up, all these recommendations, these suggestions that were coming to me, it's things I was just exposed to. I very quickly hit this place of almost numbness. They weren't really for me. And again, so many different users just within my own household, so many different devices within my own household. It's like, it's not that the recommendations were garbage, right? I assure you that they were calculated precisely from the indicators my family was providing. I mean, these formulas and the algorithms, I know they were working just like they were supposed to. But for me, the result, it was just noise, to the point that I really stopped. I stopped consuming anything. I was just exposed. I had reached, like so many others, a place where I was just digitally numb. My eyes were numb. I was content numb. I had reached a place of just true digital fatigue. And I know I'm not alone. So how do you reimagine how to go to market in this new age? How do you connect in a genuine, meaningful way with consumers where they are today? I mean, how do you make sure as a marketer or as a business that you're relevant? Because relevance is what we're all really fighting for. Let's be honest. For relevance in a time of shorter attention spans, in a noisy space filled with all the zeros and ones. So I'll give you 3 things that my team takes away to consider, that I hope you take away and consider, and I continue to challenge myself to apply. Number 1, you need to understand these new communities. They're not as simple as they used to be. To use me for an example, I remember persona was the big thing, right? Understand a persona, be descriptive about a persona, target to a persona, because that's the person you want. So I'm 45, right? Male, 3 kids, suburban. I love camping, love baseball. But this new forced and adapted online behaviors brought a new melting pot phenomenon, causing this complexity to what these communities are and where people spend time. They're multifaceted communities now. The new community and the new communities are overlapping. Use me again. I'm in a baseball coaches Facebook group, a soccer kindergarten moms group, in a social media subreddit, because I was online so much more. I went back to Reddit more, and the Stock Guys Twitch stream. Who thought I would be talking about a Twitch stream ever? That's not the same as 45, 3 kids, suburban, loves camping, loves baseball. So we have to remember that they are new communities. People are literally online more, and the places where they are, and the complexities and the signals one person gives out in the publishers in the space is different. And we have to take that into consideration when we're designing content for those specific communities. So understand that the space, the communities on space is different. It's very relative when you think of Facebook, right? Facebook is a community place. You can't just go back the way we used to. The second is almost an oldie but a goodie, right? You have to be data informed. You have to be. And you have to be creatively driven, though. There has to be a balance between the two. We've all heard content was queen, content was king. Then there was some talk around, oh, there's too much content. I'm telling you now more than ever, content is back. But it has to be content that tells a story and adds value. And we all know that mantra, right? It has to be storytelling. But it has to be storytelling to the point that it adds to the experience with the brand within the platform that they're in now. Data alone is not going to be enough to make you successful. It has to be a balance of machine and man. Now, when I say that, I've made that statement more than once in more than one audience, and I want to be clear, I'm not discounting the importance of the fantastic and limitless contributions of machine learning, deep learning, language processing, optimal character recognition, AI, all those things. They will always be superior in their sheer volume of calculations, but they'll never connect with another human. Every calculation you could muster, there's not going to be a perfect recipe for true success in content digestion. It only happens when the right content hits the right community at the right time. And take signals from where people are emotionally after being in this place of digital fatigue. You want something refreshing. You want something new. Our challenge is to make sure we look at the data, don't ignore it, but understand that we need to be creatively driven in a way that's going to have things resonate. The last, you got to be strategic. You have to be bold. you'll see the emergence of even more niche communities and platforms, old and new. How about this new incredible popularity of Twitch, right, driven by the growth in gaming? How about Clubhouse? Podcast meets talk show meets Twitter. If you're not on there, it's absolutely fantastic. And there's still a continued steady growth of Facebook groups. I mean, each piece of content, we have to put ourselves in their shoes, the content consumer's shoes. We have to be rigid and deliberate. We have to be purposeful in understanding and designing accordingly where the consumer is, what place, what time, and the biggest change now is, I think, what frame of mind. Is our offering, is our content, is it going to be relevant? Is it going to add value? Is it going to create an experience in that moment? Is it going to be enough to rise above noise? I mean, prepare something that's meant to be and is irresistibly going to be consumed, right? Strategic, not random. And think bold, but not ridiculous. I heard a provocative statement somewhere in my internet travels, I think in the last week or so, that really I felt embraced that. It made me stop and think too. And they said we, and we, they were referring to the collective, we internet users. They said, we may be tired of video content already. It appears audio may be the next hot item. And it really, when I stopped and thought, it was, it made a lot of sense, right? But it wasn't where I would go to start with automatically. So those are the three things I have for you. Make sure you understand communities. Communities are different. 2, continue to use your data, but you have to be creatively driven. You have to be creatively driven. You have to be creatively driven. 3, if there was ever a time when these 2 words on the screen meant success or would contribute to success, be strategic, not random, and be bold, not ridiculous.
Hey, Dennis, it's Jen. Yeah. I actually have a couple questions for you before we move on to the next thing. Because I know we wanted to keep this presentation a little bit shorter than we normally do. Do you actually, can you go back to the slide prior?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so I actually have a couple questions as I was listening to you speak today, which has been so informative. I was wondering, can you elaborate a little bit more? When you say be creative, what does that mean? What types of content are people really wanting to see right now that can kind of help drive traffic to their social platforms?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I will tell you that personally, and within my teams and my groups here, I will tell you that to be creative, you have to branch out to other sources. I think as individuals, we have found ourselves, I think, just in this time, almost creatively depleted, right? So being creative means continue to consume new things yourself also. But we go back to very basic, just elements of creativity, right? Whether you find them in a textbook or not. Taking words that are not associated and combining them together. Take opposites, synonyms, and jamming them together. Literally brainstorming sessions. We're very, very particular about today, right now. This is just dump time. Dump all your ideas. Don't go back and sort them. Don't go back and refine them, because we'll find if you allow yourself to do that, you go back to your old habits of creativity. And there was one specific instance that I can reference that came out. It was a dentist, and in the brainstorming session, there was the word gamble, there was the word risk, a lot of things that came up. And we went back to it the next day, and you would have never guessed what we came out of was they wanted a pair of teeth that looked like dice. So they literally, like on the sides of the teeth, they put little dots like dice. And that's not something we would have ever thought of to use right then, but just going back to almost simplifying, just being true to what you know are creative approaches, gave us one thing in that one particular post. I remember when it went out, it skyrocketed in the average, engagements and consumption and clicks that we'd ever had that particular brand. So I think that's part of how we go about it. Does that answer your question, Jen? Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. I'd also love if you could talk a little bit about how can people be competitive online without just dumping a bunch of money into an ad?
I think that's where the data side of creativity comes in.
Okay.
Right? You have to look at your performance. You have to look at your numbers. Everyone here knows what they're looking to get back on their spend. What's their return on their ad spend? And be quick to try, but also be quick to fail. So don't let something continue to fail forever and ever and ever, depending on the platform, but and specifically to where you're at, right? Facebook, I can tell you, as a rule of thumb, we give a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks before we go pulling switches and modifying things. We've just found that's a sweet spot for understanding the learning where we're going. Yeah.
So that makes the ad. So when you run an ad for 2 to 3 weeks, on Facebook, that's a pretty good time frame for an ad to start learning the data, learning the people that it's connecting with. You'll be able to see whether or not the ad is performing in an effective way or not, right?
Yes, and I'm speaking that as a generic rule of thumb, right? For our typical small, medium-sized business, right? There are definitely exceptions, right? That's not the only rule and only approach. That's why you have to continue to use data there, right? You may have someone that has a very, very clean CRM list of, tens of thousands of emails. It's not going to take as long, right? You've given Facebook a lot of very, very specific signals about what you're looking for. But when we go in with what I would consider a moderate amount of targeting and adjustments in a budget for an SMB, 2 to 3 weeks has been our sweet spot for sure to allow Facebook to get to where it needs to get to.
Okay, great. I would love to have anybody on the webinar today send in your questions through the questions tab, and that way we can answer some of those questions. If you go to the next slide, Dennis. What we're going to be doing today, you guys, is we're going to also be giving some free assessments away to assess your Facebook ads if you need a little bit of assistance and help with those as well. But we're going to be actually taking questions right now that are going to really be able to answer whatever you guys are wanting to. We'll get to as many of them as possible. We wanted to keep this webinar a little bit more short and sweet, so that way we could get to more questions and be able to answer it, because this is such a big topic for so many people. Advertising, especially when it comes to Facebook and all the changes that are going in within Facebook. We want to be able to get to those as much as possible. So I do have a question here for you, Dennis. Ashley T says she works for a company that offers a service rather than a consumer product. We're considering adding a Facebook ad to a current campaign. Oh, this is a long one. The ad would drive folks to a gated toolkit of resources on a website. They basically say that her colleague feels that it's a horrible idea because Facebook ads don't work well for this type of targeting. What are some of your thoughts or advice on this?
There's a lot of variables there.
Exactly.
What is the target and who is the audience, right? And I think you need to look, as we kind of referenced before in that first rule, understanding that new community. I think many times as marketers, we almost want to try to force a squoval peg in a square hole, right? Like it looks like it fits, but it doesn't quite fit. So I would first stop and make an assessment on that community. The person you're trying to target, what type of community are they in? What other actions did they take? Where do they spend time? And that's the key really to opening up any media plan to any new publisher. But we have found specifically on Facebook, it's one of the broadest communities just by users, right? You get much more niche if you start talking about TikTok, you're talking about Snapchat, talking about LinkedIn even, right? Those are all separate communities. I would just make sure that based on what your service is does Facebook have a community there where you're going to be able to align and put people in front of? Don't force it by targeting. Don't force it by the particular persona checklist we used to use. So does that help?
Okay. Yeah, for sure. And I also think that because that's such a specific question, if you did select yes or want more information for the free assessment, we'll be able to get a hold of you, Ashley, and kind of dive deeper in and take a look at the ad and advise you a little bit further on a one-to-one conversation for sure.
Absolutely.
Kevin Hillman has a really great question. Does high quality, well-produced videos perform better on Facebook ads than, say, a video filmed on a phone? So I feel like what he's saying is raw content versus produced content, right? And I feel like we go back and forth with this a lot just in advertising as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Dennis.
We do, right? And heaven forbid you do vertical, right?
Yeah.
But put this in your cap. You watch, folks. Vertical video will be the way of video in the next 5 years. But anyhow, I really think it depends on. It depends on the video. But these are some things I can tell you. One, video has not always been the all-time winner in creative on Facebook. We have found carousels that almost felt like a comic strip, right? I mean, each panel tells a story. We've seen them perform better than videos, just right out of the gate. We've seen combination of multimedia carousels where you have a static image, static, and then goes to a video at the end to kind of summarize really the point you're trying to drive home. We've seen those work. We've seen GIFs, debate for the ages, also work in some of that video content. But I think the signals are so varied. I would not gamble on a sure answer either way, because it again depends on that overly produced video. Some of the videos that are overly produced feel overly produced. But I can give you an example of one. I can give you an example of a mixed element. We had a client who had a video shot. It was for a scholarship giveaway for a university. But within the video, they were very creative about the way they did this. There was a phone. There was imagine just overlaying an image of a mobile phone. And then inside that mobile phone, there was a testimony that played, which was the thank you from the recipient. That was very highly produced, right? That's not something you can just shoot on your phone, because it was almost had this inception thing happening, but that was a very, very well-performing video. It was a very well-performing ad. A lot of you could tell there's just a lot of great consumption on that creative, right? That type of production doesn't happen just on your phone.
Sure.
So you have to be careful, right? What you're talking about overproducing, what you're talking about just the raw.
Right, because you can I know videographers and photographers that can get really quality work from doing it on their phone, but it's how you piece it together. So I feel like it just depends on the creative, right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. We do have another question about creative. Do you recommend creating different ad sets for testing two creatives, or should they be put into one if they're targeting to the same audiences, like doing an A/B testing, but with different creative?
Yes. It all depends on what functionality within Facebook you're using. And depending on the specifics of who's asking this question, Facebook has a built-in A/B test function, right, where you just put it all in there and it will tell you. I will tell you that we try every version. We've even tried completely separate campaigns for the same audience with separate creative. So I think a lot of that just comes to your testing based on your audience and your creative, and what kind of scoring, what kind of engagement you're going to get. So that would be a really good question. Again, hopefully they mark yes on that assessment. That's one where we could really go in and look specifically how that's set up.
Sure.
How varied are those creatives, right? Sometimes, we have two versions of creative, but one just has an extra line under a logo, right? That's not, there's a lot more that needs to be looked at and assessed there, I think. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I totally agree with you. And even Zach, that's on the webinar right now, he asks, how do you know if your ad is in the fatigue zone? Mm-hmm. And I felt like, wow, that's a pretty strong question, right? Because we're talking about Facebook ad fatigues, and I'll let you answer it, but I wanted to give my opinion with you, kind of conversational with you, Dennis, is that mm-hmm. I feel like when you start to see your ads becoming stagnant online and you're not seeing increases or influxes in the data, you're not seeing the engagement that you first saw, because when you see the data, especially on Facebook, you'll be able to track how up and down and when it's performing at its peak and when it's not. But I think in general right now, really the basis of the webinar is just saying in general, people are fatigued by advertising on all aspects, whether it's on TV, whether it's on, a Hulu ad, whether it's on the radio, it's digital, it's online, because everybody's spending so much more time in front of technology. So they're seeing more ads than they've seen before as well.
Yeah.
Do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, Jen, I think you're exactly right. What I would tell you from a very tactical element here is to pay attention to your KPIs. And what I mean is the KPIs as in the things that are important to you, right? Are you looking for your cost per engagement? You're looking at a cost per click. And then you measure those with other numbers that let you know how many times. So look at your frequency number. Use your frequency as a denominator against your cost per click, against your cost per engagement, against your cost per conversion, whatever that is. That frequency number will really tell you, that being a denominator, it will tell you a result in a number that you can establish a baseline for. And when you see that baseline or that performance number start to skew too far from that baseline you've established, that's when you need to change. Because we have seen variations of ads where frequencies 10, 12, 15, 20, and they continue to perform just fine because there's a share function, right? Or that frequency, it's being commented on, or whatever the case is. But others that they hit a frequency of 4 or 5 and they're just dead, they're done. So just pay very, very close attention to the data there. And my recommendation and the formula we use is using that frequency number as a denominator to divide those into whatever those KPIs are and those costs per metrics are, and use that as a guide.
Okay, cool. What about, and speaking of Facebook ad fatigue, would you recommend creating multiple ads that someone can rotate with an ad schedule to help combat ad fatigue so that they're ever evolving and changing?
Yes, that's a resounding yes. But remember, the ads, there's more than one piece, right? So when you talk about, you have to be careful how you answer that, right? Because sometimes rotating they're just using the exact same text and just rotating the picture, right? Or they're rotating the text and not rotating the imagery, right? Everything we look at has to be tied, has to be connected. So just make sure if you're talking about something that's rotating and new ads that can continue to rotate, make sure it's truly a new experience whenever you publish that particular piece, right? This piece, I put it there. This is for this person, this community, this way, and this I believe that they're going to consume. When you switch, does it still answer those same questions? Does it still give you a good positive result? The sake of, you can put a lot of work into just dozens and dozens and dozens of ads, and really that isn't the only thing you need to watch, and that doesn't guarantee that you're going to resist or defer people from experiencing the same ad fatigue.
Sure. So Ava wants to know, is there an average lifetime of a creative before people are tired of seeing it?
So I think it depends on the size of the audience. And that sounds like such a almost a cop out of an answer, right? But that's where that frequency piece comes in, those same KPIs I talked to earlier. We found that if we have a really high performing ad, and we feel like the performance of that ad is because of the imagery, sometimes we'll actually pull it down prematurely just to tease it back again later. Right? If you know something's going really, really well, it's almost like buying stock, right? You want to sell it when it's high, but can you bring it back? Can you short it, right, and bring it back and get more out of it? I hope that answers that.
No, I feel like that answers it, and I think that it depends on the person and what you're putting out there and the content. There's so many variables, you guys, that go into this that it's so hard to tell, because it's like we have to look at your ad, we have to look at who's your target audience, what kind of creative, what are your goals for the ad. It's not just about like putting an ad out there and then throwing darts and saying, okay, let's see what happens, right? It's all a method. There's a method to all of the madness. And I think that a lot of advertisers and marketers forget that. And we start off by just kind of throwing some things out there. But while we throw things out there, there is like a process and a plan to it. We're getting a ton of questions on like individual businesses, and a lot of like one-to-one questions. If you guys didn't or haven't marked yes to have a free assessment, then after, we're going to send a follow-up email, and you can follow up that way, and we're happy to answer some of those one-to-one questions through that and have one of our team members assist you in that. So that's one of the ways that you can have that, because I'm getting a lot of questions on having those one-to-one questions. So that will help you. But another question that somebody had, Dennis, was when putting together a budget, how do you decide on the amount to spend per ad? Is there like an amount that is a good starting place typically, or is there anything that you recommend on that? I know, again, it's like one of those situations where it all depends on what targets you're wanting to hit, what are your goals, how many people, there's so many different variables, right? But is there anything that you can talk or speak to about deciding your budget?
You're right, Jennifer. There are an infinite number of variables there. Right, as you know, Facebook, your budget is driven at a campaign level. So I'm assuming here we must be talking about a media plan. And how much money do you think you want to put against each ad? And that is, it's so broad. Use the tools that Facebook has available to you, right? And understanding, what your CPMs have been, how many people you're trying to reach. Because as you go in and budget those in those campaigns, you'll understand how many ads you have already running to those. A lot of it has to do with your bidding model. There's so many things that can run into that. That's. I mean, I'm trying to think. Here's some I don't want to give you
So
anything
it's
else.
so hard. It's so hard to say, okay, throw $500 in. You guys, you have to keep in mind when setting your budget, Facebook does a really great job of almost telling you like, hey, you're going to need to spend more money in order to reach this many people. I would definitely pay attention to those metrics. And what's included in some of those metrics are like your detailed targeting and your expansion, right? And Ryan, actually, who's on the webinar right now, has some thoughts and wants to know what your thoughts are, Dennis, on utilizing detailed targeting expansion when running an ad. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you feel like it extends it? Do we trust Facebook in order to do it in the right way, or do we stick to just what we know and do it manually ourselves?
Right. So that's a really good question. Let me speak to detailed targeting, but I do want to give a couple of directional kind of elements based on the previous question too, Jen, if I can.
Sure. Yeah.
We have seen kind of our big four CPMs through 2020 continue to come down on Facebook overall. And this is an assessment of about 3,500 campaigns, right? So not a small data set that we took this look at. CPMs came down. Cost per clicks came down. Cost per engagements came down all over the last 9 months, previous 9 months. The last month and a half, we have seen all those tick back up on an incline. So I would tell you, whatever your budgeting has been previous to this year, the first half of this year, you were getting a lot of bang for your buck as compared to last year at the same time. We are seeing that the cost, it's called the unit cost of those items on Facebook is starting to go up. So I at least wanted to give something in directional and budget. So the next piece there was around detailed targeting. I can point to the data, and I'm going to point to the data specifically here. We have seen detailed targeting on easily 90% of cases. It's a more expensive cost per unit, cost per click, cost per CPM, cost per engagement. And it's because the way Facebook does optimize. It's funny, do we trust Facebook? Do we not, right? It's one of those things where, let's be honest, I mean, Facebook's in the business to make money. That's part of their model. It's part of Amazon's model, part of Google's model, everybody. So yes, there's going to be some of that is, they're also wanting to make money. But when you look at thousands and thousands of campaigns that we've run, I mean, tens of thousands of them over the last couple of years, on the whole, the more restrictions, I'm using restrictions as a pretty harsh word here, but the more restrictions you give Facebook, the more expensive that cost per unit is going to be. It's just, we've yet to see it go the other way. Maybe 10% of the time it's off, but there's an element there, it is more expensive. Now, that's not a bad thing. I'm just talking about the cost per unit. Sometimes that unit cost, even at a premium rate for you, is going to give a better business result. So I think we need to make sure we're focusing on the right things, right? Whatever that cost per unit, whether it's that click or that's lead, whatever that lead is, if you're detailed targeting, it may be, exponentially more expensive than letting Facebook do the targeting, but that lead that comes from your detailed targeting or that transaction that comes from your detailed targeting is a higher value business unit for you, then use that. Does that answer that?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect answer. And I know like we're getting a ton of questions about creative and layouts and headlines, and I'm chatting people because they're asking a lot of different questions. So I'm helping answer some of these questions on a one-to-one as well. But I kind of wanted just to like address it in a general format, is that, what's really cool about advertising on Facebook, and I'm sure Dennis would agree with me, is that it now allows you to adjust your creative, and it will customize it and switch up your ad to target to different types of people. So you can put up to 5 different headlines. You can put up to 5 different, taglines. You can add in diverse creative, and it'll rotate those ads on a schedule for you, so that when people are seeing your ads, they're not getting as much fatigue, even though it's the same ad running, but it's switching out the creative automatically for you. Is that something that you also, that's something I typically recommend to people I work with, Dennis? Is that something that you also recommend to people as best practices? We might have lost Dennis, or he's muted. All right, guys. Well, I think we may have lost our presenter. But if you guys want to still send in some questions, I'm happy to stay on. And oh,
Are we
did we
back now?
we're back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's the internet that's not fast enough. So yes, absolutely. Facebook has some fantastic tools for doing a lot of that for you. I
Okay.
think the only other element I would add is the local IQ tool set has another set of variants and tools even on top of that. So we're able to take all the tools and technology that Facebook has, allow all those other elements, and the algorithms that we have will also even adjust budgets at a much faster rate than you can make decisions, and we can make decisions, right? So knowing that there's a technology on top of the technology that Facebook already has, use the tools that Facebook gives you. Absolutely, they're there for a reason, right? And there's the adage, the more tools you play with, the more they like you. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But I will tell you that use those tools, and when you can, if there's another piece of technology that you know works and can give you an edge up, try to take advantage of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you speaking to the tools that Local IQ and our WordStream teams offer really kind of puts things in perspective, because while some of these tools are online and capable and front facing for some of you guys to use, there are a whole set of tools that Local IQ has that can provide even further insight and data and knowledge and targeted audiences and creative for you that just takes it to a whole other level, which is pretty incredible. So Dennis, without further ado, I think we've answered pretty much all of our questions. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a recording of it post the event today for you to review and be able to answer some of those questions. And for those of you that did select yes or need more information on the poll, our team members will be reaching out to you to do those free marketing assessments with you guys over the next few days. So we look forward to chatting with all of you, and please join us for our next webinar. Thank you so much again, Dennis. It was awesome to have you on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, guys. Thank you.